Assassin's Creed Valhalla is going to feature many historical figures, and while there are going to be several that I go over in separate videos as a part of this series where I get you guys caught up with 9th century England at this point in time where the game takes place, I thought who better to start off this part of the series with than with the biggest, baddest one of them all, Ivar Ragnarsson, otherwise known as Ivar the Boneless, King of all Danes. So today I'm going to give a little bit of background as to who he was, what he did, as well as what role I believe he will have in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So before we start the video, remember that if you do enjoy, to leave it a nice, thick, and juicy like, and if you enjoy content like this as well as my coverage of other games like Cyberpunk 2077, Ghost of Tsushima Legends, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and Battlefield, then make sure you hit that big red sexy subscribe button right underneath the video. I also want to quickly shout out the members of the Shark Tank, otherwise known as my channel members. You guys are absolute legends, and I thank you very much because these videos would not be possible without you. If you want to join, there is a link in the description down below. Thank you. So let's talk about who was Ivar Ragnarsson. Ivar the Boneless, the legendary king himself. Who was he? What did he do? Well, Ivar was one of the kings that came over with the great heathen army when they showed up in England to take revenge for the death of Ragnar Lothbrok, who in the Assassin's Creed universe seems to be a real person considering you get to fight some of his Drengrs. He's not the mythical iteration of him, as some people believe that Ragnar may have been a myth. Ivar is very much real. His brothers Ubba and Halfdan are also very real. We know for a fact that they were real, but that doesn't mean there isn't a good bit of mystery around Ivar. You see, Ivar spent a lot of time in the northern part of England, from Northumbria to Scotland, and even venturing over and spending a good amount of time in Ireland, where he was known as Imar. A lot of people think Imar and Ivar are the same person, simply because they're described as being very similar, and when Ivar disappears in England, Imar appears in Ireland, so the connection kind of makes sense. But this whole disappearing thing, take note of that, because we're going to talk about it a little bit later when I discuss his role in Valhalla. But Ivar was a very effective leader. He wasn't just the ruthless brute many people portray him as. He's actually regarded as being quite cunning. I'm not going to go into too much detail as to some of the things that he did specifically, because that could lead into spoilers for some of the events in the game. But I think one of the important things to look at is a place like Dumbarton Rock. Dumbarton Rock was regarded as one of the unconquerable castles in England. It's positioned in a way to where it's near impossible for someone to siege it, someone to lead an attack up it. It's just not going to work out. But Ivar, with his great cunning and not simply using brute force, was able to conquer Dumbarton Rock fairly easily for a castle considered to be so unconquerable even by experts to this day. So that just gives you an idea as to who Ivar was. Sure, the facade of being this brutal, ruthless man who just tortures Saxons and Christians everywhere he goes. In fact, the way we're introduced to him in Valhalla is with him torturing one Christian by using another one to actually, like, he already blinded him and then he's torturing the guy, which in its own way is torture for the guy that's doing the torturing. And it's really just like a super messed up situation. Like, it's not good for anyone involved except Ivar, because he seemed to really enjoy this. But again, I think this is part of his cunning. I could be totally wrong and I'm just reaching too far into this, but I think he's much more complex than this. Sure, he's definitely going to be a dirty, ruthless guy, but I think that's all a part of a show. If you remember in Assassin's Creed 4, need I remind you, it's also written by Darby McDevitt, Blackbeard is very open about the fact that when he goes on raids, he puts on a show. There's a whole scene, he literally explains it.
Ahoy! Any luck? I found one crate hidden beneath a school of sharks. Sadly, the elixir inside is quite spoilt. Laden. Perish.
We steal medicines now.
Remember the pardon, Thatch. We're to be subtle.
Says Ornagold, a pirate, now too proud to call himself one.
He prefers caution to cannons.
Caution's nothing without charisma. Or if a man plays the fool, then it's only fools he'll persuade, but appear to be the devil. And all men will submit.
And would you be the devil?
Or an audience. Aye. All a big show. If your quarry something to fear, Some hellish thing from a fever dream. And men will drop to their knees, pleading for their lord before all else.
Oh, God. It looks fine.
Of course it does. You can find a quiet way to acquire medicines. Tell me soon. Otherwise, I'll handle it myself.
And as you can see here, you can kind of draw some parallels between Blackbeard and Ivar to a certain extent. Obviously, we haven't played the game yet, but just part of my prediction is I think Ivar and Blackbeard will have pretty good connections. They're very similar characters, and I think not only the fact that they're written by the same guy, but the fact that Ivar is one of the few characters that has had specific key art. Him, Valka, Alfred, Eivor, and Basim are the only ones that have key art specific to them, meaning he's probably going to be part of this inner ring of characters that are going to play a very large role in the game. There's a lot of other figures in the game that just don't have like this main key art. Now this could just be because Ivar is regarded as one of the more legendary figures in this time period, but I do think he's going to play a pretty significant role. I think he'll be similar to Blackbeard in the way that I described, that he's putting on a show of ruthlessness and he's much more complex than that. But I also see a little bit of parallels to Leonardo da Vinci. And this sounds weird, but stick with me. Leonardo was someone who would also disappear. There's literally a whole DLC about it in Brotherhood called the Da Vinci Disappearance, and in real life, Da Vinci did disappear for weird chunks of time and then come back with all these new inventions. It was crazy. Like, there's even like ancient alien theorists think that he was abducted by aliens and shown weird technology. I'm not saying to believe any of that, but it's like weird how he would just disappear from anywhere and then come back with all this like cool ideas and stuff. And you see something similar with Ivar here. Ivar will disappear for like 7 years from any records and then show up conquering in Ireland, or he'll disappear again and then show up conquering in England and Scotland and all these places, and you're like, what is going on? And I think that is a pretty decent connection. And I think similarly to how when Da Vinci disappeared, and there's a DLC about that in Assassin's Creed, I think we may follow Ivar to Ireland in the Wrath of the Druids DLC. I think that could be something that we see because obviously he was very active in Ireland, and it's Ivar. I think he's going to be a significant character, and it would not be totally unbelievable to follow said significant character into a DLC. That's something that happens. You see characters from the main story again. It's not inconceivable, and it would make a lot of sense, especially if a piece of Eden is involved. I could see it being similar to the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, which would actually be cool because it'd be almost like taking the Da Vinci Disappearance DLC and mixing it with the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, and those were two pretty good DLCs, I might add. They're pretty interesting. So to see something like that, throw it in Ireland, I think that could be really fun. I'm not saying I know any of this. Again, this is all speculation as to what role I think he's going to have in the game. I do think he's going to be a very, very important and integral character to not only the main story, but to Eivor's development as a person and what his worldview is going to be, including his viewpoint on the Hidden One and Order of the Ancients conflict that is going on in the shadows. He may be able to provide some insight into that. He may even possibly, although unlikely, be a part of that conflict. That will also be very interesting to see. But at the end of the day, I'm very excited to see what Ivar has in store in this game, what things he's going to do, what kind of ideals he may put forward for the Hidden Ones and Eivor, and what kind of mischief we may get into. I think he's going to be a very complex character, and I'm very fascinated by the history that does follow Ivar around, including the fact that we may follow him into the Ireland DLC. I think that's going to make for a very awesome story, and I know Darby McDevitt is not one to take historical figures and just turn them into nothing. They're just, oh, yep, here's Blackbeard. Yeah, he's cool, isn't he? That's him. He doesn't do that. He makes some very key and important characters that you want to care about. Someone who is more than what history let them be. And I think he will do something like that with Ivar, where we see more than just a ruthless king that is there to only conquer and torture people. I think there is more behind Ivar than what we see even in the demo. Obviously, that's only a snippet, and I think that's what they want us to see. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, remember to leave a nice, thick, and juicy like. And of course, I will see you in the next video.